Hello again and welcome to another Warlord Wednesday, the episode of the week where we talk all things bolt action. In today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at the Imperial Japanese Army and some basic tactics that you can use to get the most out of your Banzai boys. The Imperial Japanese are one of my favorite factions in bolt action. In fact, they were the first army that I collected for that game system. They're a really interesting force. They have a very unique play style and they work completely differently to other armies in the game. This means that they can be a little bit tricky for newer players to get into. And so what I want to do with today's video is share with you some of the basic and fundamental tactics and concepts that I have developed with my Japanese army that has helped me lead them to success on the battlefield. So whether you are a new player getting into bolt action for the first time and you're thinking of getting the Japanese as your starter army, or you're a veteran who is looking to expand their collection towards the IJA, this video is designed to help you avoid some of those initial pitfalls and point you in the right direction, getting you started off on the right foot for your Japanese collection. But without further ado, let's unlock the secrets of the Bushido, embrace the way of the samurai, and banzai right into today's video. So the first golden rule of playing the Japanese is ABC. Always be charging. Your army is primarily a melee-focused one. That is where your greatest strengths lie. You still have the ability to get into firefights with people, but other factions have rules that are geared towards shooting. Your army rules, such as banzai and being fanatic across your entire force, are focused on getting you into melee and getting you there as quickly as possible. The longer it takes you to get across the board and start putting pressure on the enemy, getting into combat with them, the more and more you're letting your army advantages slip away, and you're giving your opponent the chance to soften your army up and make your charges weaker. Of course, you have to be sensible about this. There are always exceptions that prove the rule. For example, you might have 4 inexperienced infantry left over in a squad. If you go and charge them against a 10-man unit of veteran US Marines, all that's going to happen is you're going to lose 4 guys and a dice in your activation. And of course, you need to keep your eye on the ball and focus on the mission. If you've got a squad that is just sitting there on an objective, but it's doing a great job of locking that position down, making it very hard for your opponent to take that off you, charging off that objective and giving up some points and potentially losing the game, is not really very clever. So make sure that you'll always be charging, make sure that you've got that sort of mindset in the back of your head, but also keep your eye on the prize. The next golden rule is speed, violence, and momentum. The Imperial Japanese in bolt action are always about being on the attack, being aggressive, taking the fight to the enemy, putting them under a huge amount of pressure right from the get-go. You need to be embracing that mentality. You need to be all gas, no brakes. By doing this, you will be playing a very proactive game and your opponent will be forced to react to what you are doing. This means you are controlling the flow of the game. You are dictating which fights happen where and how the game is going to pan out. Often, this will force your opponent into a defensive mindset, and they'll be so concentrated on trying to keep their guys alive and trying to hold the line against the successive banzai charges that they won't even have time to consider the wider mission, and it may mean that you take more casualties, but you end up winning the game in the long run. This is probably the most important golden rule we're going to talk about today. I have lost many games with my Japanese because I was too timid with them. I didn't embrace speed, violence, and momentum. And I have also seen many games lost, be it online with battle reports or in real life observing other people's games, because the Japanese player, rather than going all in, getting aggressive, instead got into an extended firefight with the opposing faction. And all that led to was the Japanese player getting whittled down and losing the game in the long run when the opponent was able to surge forward and take out his weakened units. Coming in at number 3, we have the boys over toys philosophy. Simply put, you need to outnumber your opponent. You need to have mass in your infantry squads. If they're bringing 30, 40 infantry, you need 50 or 60. Frankly, you're going to be taking more casualties than your opponent. You will be charging out across no man's land. Hopefully you'll have some soft cover, but that's not always an option. And you may not be able to take advantage of things like dense terrain because you can't run through those and it's going to start slowing you down. Invariably, this means that even if your unit started out at full strength, they're not going to be full strength when they get to grips with the foe. Therefore, you need to have enough men in your squads to take a few deaths on the way in and still have plenty of bayonets left to be confident that the charge is going to go your way. Of course, taking these bigger squads is going to cost you more points, so you need to be leaving unnecessary equipment at home. One of the most common mistakes I see new Japanese players make is they end up loading their infantry squads up with LMGs and also knee mortars. An LMG costs you 20 points. That's the equivalent of getting 2 more riflemen in your squad. And considering you're going to be banzai charging across the board, it's actually unlikely that you're going to be getting good use out of that LMG anyway. Now, don't panic if you're hearing this and you're looking down at your recently built Japanese models and you realize that you've got a bunch of light machine guns. Having lots of different weapon options in your army is never a bad thing. Sometimes you want 15 infantry just with rifles and bayonets to charge across no man's land and die for their emperor. But sometimes you want a unit that can perform multiple roles, something that's a little bit more tactically flexible. Maybe you'll go for a squad of paratroopers, which have got an LMG and a couple of SMGs in there. Something that's veteran, that can do defensive and aggressive operations. Having a nice wide variety of models and weapons in your army will allow you to try different things out and find the game plan and style that works for you. And of course, stepping away from the tactics for a moment, having a wider variety of models also makes it much more fun to paint your army. But speaking of fire support, this actually leads me onto my final golden rule, which is simply bombardment. You need to make sure that you soften the enemy up before you go in. You absolutely can fully embrace the way of the samurai and go all close combat all the way and try and overwhelm your opponent through sheer bloody-minded combat. But this is a very risky tactic, and more often than not, I have seen it fail. If you don't bring adequate fire support, all that ends up happening is you charge your units across no man's land, and they take a lot of damage on their way in, and then you just bump into the brick wall, which is your opponent's essentially full strength army. You need to be inflicting casualties on your opponent and putting as many pins on him as you can whilst you're getting across the battle grid. Think about it. Not only are you going to make the fights easier for yourself and hopefully retaining that numerical advantage in close combat, but you're also going to be making your own men more survivable. For every casualty that you inflict on the opponent, it's one less bullet coming your way, and that's one less potential death in your force. On top of that, if you get lots and lots of pins on the enemy force, that means that their shots are going to be less accurate, and therefore, more of your men should make it. And that covers the 4 golden rules for playing Japanese in bolt action. But all of this is like my opinion, man. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed today's video, then make sure you smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. If you want to support the channel and help create more bolt action content, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By becoming a supporter, you will gain access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with over 1,500 active members, including a pretty strong and dedicated bolt action community. And before we go, I just want to take a moment to say a big thank you to all of the latest members. So thank you to Somewhat Amusing, Armageddon Slayer, Oradina, Thumbtack22, Mark Barlow, Russell Sorenka, Dallas Sosby, and Help Me Please. Thank you guys for doing your part. I also want to shout out the latest Patreons as well, so a big thank you to Evan Osborne Lomax, Elijah J, Simon D, Cyberez, and Iron Nerd. And last, but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have genuinely gone above and beyond the Call of Duty. So a massive thank you to Alan Blunt III, Bon Vert, Mark Panconi, Ross Miller, Sawfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Diesel Fox, August Varney, and Absolute Rubbish. Thank you guys. I genuinely couldn't do this without you. Hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.